Hey guys, it's Justin with Shock Therapy, and today we're going to show you how to install a front limit strap kit on an X3. This limit strap kit is a brand new product for us, and the things it's going to do for you is stop extension clunk, especially when you're rock crawling or through big whoops at low speed. It'll also save the components inside the shock from any premature failure, especially if you have a heavy wheel and tire package or a long travel suspension on the car that might add leverage to the shock. Our patented limit strap design is different from anything else on the market because it clamps directly to the shock, which gives you the least amount of leverage on the limit strap system, which creates longer life and more adjustability in your system. It's a relatively easy installation, so with that being said, let's get started. So as you see in front of you is a complete limit strap kit. We recommend that you take all of the components that we send you and lay them out on the workbench in advance. This way you can see that you have all the parts you need and you can lay the parts out in order that you're going to install them. Some of the parts that you're going to get in the kit will be 2 billet aluminum clevis clamps, 2 lower shock bolt spacers, longer lower shock bolts, adjustable clevises, as well as O-rings for the upper clevis mount. Obviously we have 2 limit straps for the front as well. Some of the tools that you'll need to install this kit are going to be an assortment of 3/4 inch wrenches and sockets, 18mm wrenches and sockets, and a 5/8 open end wrench and 5/8 socket as well. Different length 3/8 ratchets will make the installation quicker. Now that you've laid everything out and you have all the tools that you need, it's time to go ahead and put it on the car. Now just so that you know, the car that we're doing the installation on has the reservoirs for the shocks flipped to the outside. This reservoir is normally mounted with the resi on the inside. Either way, reservoir outside or reservoir inside, the installation of our limit strap kit is exactly the same. So the first step is to pop off this front hood section. Support the plastic with one hand and pop the rubber mount with the other. First, you're going to grab the billet aluminum clevis clamp. Separate the clamp and use the end that has the mounting hole in it. Install this from the bottom underneath the fender on the rear portion, top of the front shock. Make sure when you install this part that the logo is right side up, and install the back to where it touches the plastic firewall, and then rotate it about a 1/4 inch forward. Now grab the other half of the clamp and install it with the logo right side up. It's also helpful to grab the Allen socket and use it for leverage when you're installing these by hand. With the Allen bolts finger tight, make sure that the clocking against the rear plastic is accurate, and also make sure that the clamp is installed all the way against the head of the shock. Next, grab the Allen ratchet and socket and go ahead and tighten up the clamp. All of these bolts get torqued to 40 foot-pounds. Also, tighten them in an alternating pattern. Now that your billet clamp is installed on the shock, the next step is to take one of the adjustable clevises and install it inside the billet clamp. Do this by loosening one of the jam nuts off the top and make sure that the next jam nut is about 1.5 inches down. And install it in the mounting hole in the billet clamp. With the clevis installed, you want to leave these both loose for now so that we can adjust the system later, and install it with the top of the clevis basically flush with the upper jam nut. Next, grab the limit strap because we're going to be mounting this to the upper clevis. Our limit straps have 2 different holes in their tab. The larger 14mm hole goes into the clevis. The smaller 12mm hole goes to the bottom of the shock when we get to that point. Remove the clevis bolt and spacer. Get ready to install the O-ring in this mount. The O-ring is designed to take up a little bit of space between the clevis and the limit strap so they don't make any noise. This might be a little bit hard. Install the O-ring on the bolt. With the O-ring on the bolt, pull the bolt back just enough to get the limit strap in and thread it in all the way. Grab a 5/8 socket and ratchet to tighten this bolt. You don't have to tighten this bolt all the way at this point. Hand tight is good enough until the end of the process. Now repeat the same steps on the opposite side. Next, you're going to jack up the front of the car until the tires are just barely off the ground. Next, with the car jacked up with the tires a little bit off the ground, we want to confirm that the overall shock length is what it's intended to be. The reason that we're measuring the shock length is to make sure that we adjust the limit strap correctly at the end of this process. We want to make sure that the strap is choking the system up no more than it has to be, but enough to not have any extension clunk. This means that when we're done, we're going to want the limit straps to hold the shock about 1/2 inch shorter than it is with no strap on it at all. So next, take a tape measure and measure from bolt hole to bolt hole and confirm that it's 32 1/4 inches long. With one end of the tape measure in the middle of the top bolt, run the tape to the bottom bolt, dead center, and confirm that it's 32 1/4 inches. Next, with 18mm tools, loosen and remove the lower shock bolt. It's easiest to remove the lower shock bolt if you take your toes and tuck them underneath the tire and lift the tire slightly as you push on the lower shock bolt. Once you've removed the factory lower bolt, replace it with our longer supplied lower bolt. Use the same technique with your toes to line up the hole as you did when you removed the factory bolt. Repeat these steps on the other side. Now you can drop the car on the ground so that we can install the spacers and the limit strap on the lower bolt. Next, install the lower bolt spacer, the limit strap, and the hardware to hold the limit strap on. Make sure that you keep the hardware loose and repeat this process on the other side. Now you're going to jack the car up off the ground one more time. With the car raised up and the strap tight, go ahead and tighten the lower hardware. The reason that we have you tighten the lower hardware while the strap is tight and the suspension is hanging is to ensure that the lower bracket is perfectly straight in line with the strap. If you were to tighten this hardware with the car sitting on the ground and this strap not perfectly straight with the lower tab, then over time the strap will pull on the crooked lower tab and rip the strap. So when you're tightening this hardware, make sure that this strap and this bracket are perfectly straight. With the car still up in the air, it's time to pick a coil spring that you're going to attach the limit strap tether to. It's at this point when the strap is fully taut that you want to pick a coil spring in line with the tether. You don't need to strap that tether on completely, just do it temporarily so that we can set the length of the tether when the car is on the ground. Grab the tether and pick the coil spring that's closest to the tether where it's stitched to the strap. This would be the coil spring we want in this case. Wrap the tether around the coil spring back through the buckle one time and leave it. When the car goes back on the ground, we'll come back to this and set the length. Next, grab the tape measure and measure the overall length of the shock one more time. If you remember from the first time we measured the shock, it was 32¼ inches long. When we set the strap system up, we want our strap to limit the shock length by 1 inch to 1/2 inch, somewhere in that range. When the strap is brand new, you might want to err towards the 1 inch direction because the straps will stretch over the first 100 to 200 miles. That's the reason why we have an adjustable system, because as the straps stretch, you can adjust the clevis back up and keep the system quiet and only at the length that you have to have. So again, measure the shock, center of bolt to center of bolt. Our measurement is 31¾ inch. That gives us 1/2 inch shorter than a fully extended shock. This would be perfect if this strap had been run for 100 miles. We would want it to sit 1/2 inch shorter. But since this strap is going to stretch, being brand new, we're going to set the system 1/2 inch shorter than it currently is, which would put it at 31¼ inches, or 1 inch shorter than fully extended. Repeat the same steps on the other side. Now you can drop the car back on the ground for the final time and get ready to adjust the clevis for the final adjustment. Now ultimately, we would like to see the length of this system 1/2 inch shorter than the stock shock is with no strap. That's assuming that the straps have already been stretched and they're not going to get any longer over time. But since these straps are brand new, they should stretch about 1/2 inch in the first 100 miles. Our last measurement when the car was off the ground was 31¾ inch compared to 32¼ That's 1/2 inch shorter than the shock was stock. So we need to raise the system up to choke the system another 1/2 inch, making the overall length 1 inch shorter than the stock shock was. This will allow the strap to stretch about 1/2 inch over the next 100 miles, and it'll also put the strap in the right spot to have the system at 1/2 inch shorter than stock once it's stretched. So grab your tape measure and measure the height of the clevis in the bracket. Our clevis is 1/2 inch tall from the bottom of the bracket to the top of the clevis. So we're going to adjust this system to raise it up 1/2 inch more than it is right now, which would be 1 inch total. Now we have raised our clevis another 1/2 inch from where it was. The top of the clevis measures 1 inch from the base of the bracket. We know that this is going to limit the system another 1/2 inch, and it'll be a perfect measurement. Now that you have the limit strap adjusted properly, you can go ahead and tighten the jam nuts for that adjustable clevis. Once this side is done, you can repeat that on the other side. Make sure when you're tightening the jam nuts that the clevis and the strap are perfectly straight with the shock. You don't want this twisted when you tighten those jam nuts. The last step in the process for our installation is to set your tether length. Since we've already picked the coil spring when the system was fully stretched out, we know all we have to do is tighten the tether to about 2 inches. So bring it in to 2 inch gap and finalize the tether through the last piece of the buckle. With this length determined, you can actually trim the tether for a clean fit. Repeat these steps on the other side. Congratulations, your installation is now done. You can see that it wasn't that hard. Just want to make sure that you keep up on the adjustments when it comes to the straps. As we've mentioned many times throughout these instructions, these straps will stretch for the first few hundred miles of their life. Once they've done that, they should remain the same length for the rest of their life. Typical strap length stretch will be 1/2 inch in the first few hundred miles. Typical lengths that we like to see the system kept at is 1/4 to 1/2 inch shorter than the shock is overall length without the strap. This will limit the least amount of travel possible and keep the system from extending on the shock body itself. We want the strap to stop the extension just short of the shock extending fully. If you find after the first few hundred miles that your car starts to clunk in the front once again, that means that the straps have stretched long enough to allow the shock to extend on the body. No problem. Grab the adjustable clevis and raise it 1/4 inch. This will bring the system back up enough to not clunk, and that way you can manage the system as it extends and shortens throughout its life. The limit straps that we have in this kit are a quad strap. That means it's not a single strap, double strap, it is 4 straps stitched together. They're the strongest strap you can buy. They last the longest. But keep in mind, limit straps are a wearing item, just like brake pads and other things. They will need to be changed over time. The amount of time that they'll last depends on the terrain and also the weather where you drive. Depending on your environment, the straps can last as long as 5,000 to 6,000 miles. If you're in an area with a little bit more salt, you can expect the straps to last about 2,000 to 3,000 miles. Either way, manage a strap, watch them, check lengths, adjust accordingly, and you'll be fine no matter what you're doing with your car. We know you're going to love this limit strap kit as much as we do. Enjoy your car without any front clunking ever again. In my teeth there?
Nope, you're good.
Don't have grease down here from doing the strap?
Nope, doesn't look like you've been sucking off any CVs.
Okay. You know, I do have to say though, Chase, you look extremely professional today. You don't
Yep.
have the wallpaper shorts, you don't have the socks past your knees.
Even with my...
You actually have a dress shirt and unshaven. It's kind of, you know.
We got the clap.
Bring the clap. Clap winds me up, man. Gets mojo and juice flowing. Makes me actually put up with standing in front of you.
Hey man, I'm the one who's got the hard job. I gotta watch you over and over and over.
Horrible.